Well, good evening. It's Pastor Ryan. It's actually, when I'm recording, it's not the evening, it's the middle of the afternoon, but I wanted to get this recorded and uploaded so it would turn up on your feed in the evening. And this could be simply for our evening devotion. I've got a little devotion I'm going to read that I will in a bit, but first I want to talk about just some simple things you can do to help um, bring yourself present to whatever devotion it is that you're reading. And it's been my experience that finding something good to read, that's not really the problem. There's so much good stuff out there. And right now, there's especially a lot of good stuff out there. If you do want any suggestions, I'm going to include my contact information in the description, my email anyway. And if you send that you'd like some suggestions of good online stuff, I'd be more than happy to point you in the right direction. But what I want to talk about are different things that we can do to bring ourselves present and sort of calm our mind as we do our devotions. And it's not as if God needs these things. In fact, God's bigger than all the stuff that kind of keeps us distracted from our devotions, but it's helpful for us. So these are just some things I've learned, and I don't claim to be an expert, and none of this is my own stuff. It's all things that someone's taught me that's been helpful. But the first is, and it's kind of like Matthew, in Matthew 6, chapter 6:34, where Jesus says, "So don't worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will bring worries of its own." That can sound like bad news, I know that, but just the piece of practical wisdom in there is when you start to go in a worry spiral, you kind of have your plate and there are the things that are immediate that maybe you're worrying about, and then you just start worrying and you add on to that and you start throwing things on your plate that may be even further off than tomorrow, but the rest of the week, the following week, and even years. And what happens is we just start worrying about all these different things and our mind gets so ahead of us. In fact, maybe me doing that got you a little anxious. Well, what they say you can do to kind of bring yourself to the present is just pay attention to what's actually in front of you. Simple things like taking a deep breath and really filling your lungs. Not just, most of us breathe here all the time, but you can breathe down in your diaphragm and you'll feel that. And so you just take a deep breath and you feel it get full in here, and you can even hold it and breathe it out. And on a physical level, they do say that calms you down. But you can use your eyes, your nose. You can't see my desk, but I can, and it's just an old wooden desk, but I can see the grains, and I can feel how smooth it is with my hands. Just notice the different variation in the grain, and that there's no particular pattern, but when you really focus on these things, it's quite soothing. You can use your nose. I've got an orange here. This orange doesn't smell too much, but if I scratch on the skin a little bit, that nice orange smell, I especially like that one. But those are just easy things you can do. Pay attention to what your eyes are showing you right now in front of you, what your nose is smelling, what you're feeling. Take a deep breath, and that'll help move your attention from all these abstract things that are way off in the distant future and bring them down to the present. That's just advice stuff, and anyone can do that. I want to talk a little bit about Jesus, of course, and our devotion this evening comes from this really nice book that I stumbled across a couple of years ago, actually. It's called Grace and Addiction. In my screen, I'm looking at it, and it's mirrored, and I don't know if when I upload it, it will be either, but this is a priest who struggled with addiction and got himself into AA. And he talks about what he discovered there is just how it is a real true spirituality. And I'll say with reading this book, it's one of the, this would be a suggestion for your devotions. You could read through it, and it's broken into nice short sections. But he tells the story. It's not his story, actually. It's a story another pastor told to him. And it captures a few of the things that we talked about, and also it brings Jesus into the mix, which is so helpful. So I'm going to read the story. It's not very long. It looks like it's about 5 paragraphs. And this pastor tells a story that I had taken a week off work, and our kids were with their grandparents. My wife and I were really looking forward to our staycation. We'd get some good R&R and also check some things off that long to-do list every homeowner knows all too well. Day 1 was great, fun, restful, and productive. But that night I found myself filled with anxiety. I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that my vacation would eventually end and I'd have to go back to the office. I love my work, but I was overwhelmed thinking about the sheer amount of stuff that loomed in my inbox, the piles of paper on my desk, the events I had to plan. I began to expand my worries beyond my professional life. I began thinking about the drama in my extended family, and anyone who has a family knows what kind of a mistake this is. And he says, eventually I drifted into a shallow sleep, only to wake with an intense pain in my jaw. I had been clenching my teeth all night. The same thing happened the second night and the third. Apparently it takes 3 days for this pastor to reach desperation. So they say finally they got up, went downstairs, and knelt in their living room. And as they prayed, they say, with their eyes closed, this pastor says, I saw Jesus and me. He was looking at me and I was looking at him, or I was trying to. I could barely see over an armload of boulders I was carrying. Each boulder represented a burden in my life, one of my anxieties, stresses, or fears. Barely able to hold them, I heard Jesus say, give them to me. I started handing over these enormous stones. As I did, I named each one. Finally, Jesus held them all. I looked at my empty hands. I felt light. I could stand up straight for the first time. I could breathe again. When I looked back at Jesus, I noticed that he was beginning to grow. And suddenly he was enormous. So enormous, in fact, that these boulders, which had not changed in size one bit, were now like little pebbles in his hands. He casually put them in his pockets, looked at me, smiled, and walked away. I opened my eyes, went back upstairs, and went to sleep. So I hope it's obvious why I chose that one. It demonstrates so well how we just keep on adding onto our plate of worries, and it gets to be so far ahead of us. And then what he does of bringing Jesus into that mix, that you all who are listening, you have more than just practices to draw yourself to the present. That'll be helpful. But what you have is a Lord and Savior who's bigger than these things. A Lord and Savior who's been with his people in really hard times and who specializes in making a way out of no way. And for him, the things that seem so big to us aren't. And in his hands, our giant concerns are like pebbles. So that's a really simple little personal visualization devotion that you could do tonight. And the thing is, you don't need anything for that. You can just imagine what your anxieties are as boulders and then hand them over to Jesus and take some time there and see how much bigger he is than those things are. And that's hard to do, I know, and you might do it and you'll feel calm and then you'll get ready for bed and it'll be all over again. That's how it is for me so often. But the other thing that you have, of course, is a pastor to reach out to. And if you're filling your plate with worries more than you know is helpful, don't hesitate to reach out. So I wish you all blessings in this, and we'll get through, and when it's time, we'll get to worship together again, and that'll be such a blessing. But until then, may this be some help. May knowing that you're in my prayers be some help, and may the offer to reach out to me be a little bit of help too. But we're all in this together. Good night, Pastor Ryan.